Yeah. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck.
Rakhan.
So, Vignesh, give me the cue to start.
Siddharth?
Should we just give it one more minute, guys? It's 1 minute. It says
We are
5
live.
hours.
Oh yeah, we are live.
Let's start.
Ram, okay to start?
Please go ahead, Padmini.
Okay. Hello, all, and a very good evening to all of you. COVID has brought in a whole host of reflections and a plethora of new learning. With the vaccination drive on acceleration mode across the world, thankfully, it is time to focus on our emotional health as much as we are focusing on our physical well being and, of course, the immunity boosters. Many important aspects of our life are rarely visible on WhatsApps or DPs or Facebook or even on our LinkedIn profiles. And especially those deep moments, life changing moments, and yes, vulnerable moments. Even behind success stories, and we see so many of those, there is a trail of many moments never spoken about. And it's time to embrace every aspect of who we are, in particular, our vulnerabilities and imperfections. Today is a celebration of those imperfections, and we have an open conversation put together, curated for all BITSians on a unique topic, Imperfect Me. Well, we have a wonderful set of panelists from diverse backgrounds who have been so generous with their time and thoughts. Moderating the panel is our dear friend Ram Kumar from the 1991 batch. Should I introduce him as a senior partner with Cedar Consulting? Or should I introduce him as an ardent fan of the great poet Subramanya Bharatiyar? Or should I introduce him as a champion for high quality education of rural students through this amazing initiative, eVidya Loka? But I love introducing Ram as a strong supporter of Shakti and women power, and as a person who embraces imperfections as much as he embraces new experiences. Over to you, Ram.
Thank you, Padmini. Never been flattered so much in a long time. So thank you for that. Um, well, I guess this is an occasion to be amongst BITSians after many, many years, and hopefully beginning of many more years to come as well. I would actually want to do a quick introduction of the panelists that we have today. And before I jump into the introduction, I guess the session today, by definition, is about celebrating imperfection. So please don't expect the panel to be as perfect as you would expect everywhere else. Today's discussion is going to be as free flowing as one could expect it to be. Well, let's start with, since I have been given the honor of, championing, the Shakti, and as it would be appropriate, let's start with the ladies. I would welcome on board, starting with Shalini, 2004 batch from the Goa campus. It's amazing to know about her. I got to know her for the last, in the last couple of weeks as we started interacting. She has been, she's an interesting person, an accomplished writer, an author, and today we're going to hear a lot from you, Shalini. Welcome on board.
Thank you.
Our second panelist, Divya Devaraj in 2001 batch from Pilani campus. Very interesting journey, and as we speak about the not so visible parts of the journey we have all led from our campus days to where we are, it's going to be very fascinating to hear from you, Divya. Divya, for those who don't know her, she is the Commissioner for Women and Child Welfare, Government of Telangana. We have Raghu Rajagopal, 1987 batch, 4 years my senior. Apart from being the Vice President and Head of the Tech Hub at TTEC, he is also a Managing Trustee at Punarjanmam. It's a very interesting story that we are all waiting to hear from you, Raghu. And, I always like to say that, look, I work for a firm called Cedar, and Cedar, for those who know Tamil, is a definition of a student. And as students, we all look forward to listening from the Guru. And here we have Guru Raj Kalyan. Guru is a 1985 batch, and he's having fascinating journeys to share with us, from around the world, and over the last in a couple of weeks, I've heard from him all the way from Italy to Japan. I think we've been having very interesting conversations, and China, how can I forget, Guru? So without much ado, let me again welcome all the panelists on board. Thank you again for being here. I would possibly start the discussion, if I may, with requesting each of us, and I could start with you, Shalini. If you could actually share with us your journey, and if I can emphasize again the not so visible part of the journey that many may not know, on where you started from the campus days to where we are today. Shalini.
Yeah. Thank you, Ram. So it's so nice to be here among all of you. So like as Ram introduced me, I'm from 2004 batch BITS Goa. I'm the first batch, and I graduated triply in 2008. And after my graduation, I worked in the consumer electronics for 2 years, like in Sony and Nokia. Then I did my MTech from IIIT Bangalore and moved on to electronics industry. I worked as a Bluetooth verification engineer for almost 6 years in Broadcom and then Cypress Semiconductors. So like my journey, like in 2018 December, so after working almost for 10 years as an engineer, I quit my job and I started writing full time. So like for so many people, and even for me, it's a kind of a drastic turn of change in profession. It was like a 180-degree turn in the profession. And sometimes people ask me like why I quit my job. Is it because of the classic corporate like corporate problems like work pressure or like office politics or something like that? But to them I tell that no, it's none of that. Actually, I actually had a very healthy working environment and a very supportive manager and colleagues. So for me, the change in my career from an engineer to a writer, it has been because of not what I was getting out of my job, or not was what I was not getting out of my job. It was, if I put it this way, it was because I was not able to give my 100% to what I was doing. So that's the main kind of reason which like was troubling me. So as BITSians very perfectly know about the average. So average is a very important term in a BITSian's life. So from my BITS days, I was trying to kind of cling to the average or above average. So as every BITSian tried to do. And from the BITSian days and to the engineering days, I kind of having a feeling that I was trying to cling on to the average, trying my best to stay around the average. And even if I put so much effort, like there was something missing actually. So I knew that, like, deep inside, I knew that something is missing. I was not as passionate like my colleagues or somebody who, when they discuss about the new trends or consumer electronics, I was like, okay, fine. I mean, I was just trying to fake interest. I was not having I was not completely 100% involved in that. So I think that is one reason I decided to do different things, for some time. So I traveled all around India for 3 years. Along with my job, and I kind of taught underprivileged children, and I took up an environment project in Bangalore. So I was doing all that, kind of hoping that, okay, this could bring some meaning to my life. This could be my thing, something that defines me. And interestingly, none of them actually became my thing, but they all helped in different ways. But uh, especially my travel, after I started traveling throughout India, I realized that I love writing travel blogs. So more than my travel, I was so fascinated about coming back and writing about it. So that's where I think my journey as a writer started very at a very young age. But that is when I rediscovered my love for writing. So I used to write as a child. I used to write as a, maybe from second or third standard I started writing. I even published when I was in school. So but there was a hiatus when I joined engineering, and then I started working. But after I started doing this travel blog, so I do have a very active travel blog. So I realized that, okay, maybe this could be my thing, then I was like slowly getting into the groove of that. So then I moved on to like travel writing, then fiction writing. I started writing in English fiction, and I published now I have published 2 books, and 2 fiction books and 2 travel guides, and have been like contributing to different short story anthologies, things like that. So it's like just like I'm writing only for like 2 years right now. So I cannot, I mean, actually, I cannot even call myself an accomplished author or anything. I'm just a beginner. But when I look at from this perspective, what I feel is like um, I am not. What I feel is I'm not faking it anymore. So that's a major difference I can feel from my engineering career to career as a writer or a technical writer. I'm not faking it anymore. I can actually give 100% to this thing. So that is one of the major change what I have been facing. Rather than my career change, it has a lot of it has a lot of influence in my life. And I think the work satisfaction, I initially I thought that it was just a term coined by the HR team. It was just a myth, the work satisfaction thing, but it's not a myth actually. So that's what I realized from my journey so far. And yeah, I'm just a beginner, and there are a lot of uncertainties around me, and the literature field is not, I mean, not an easy field to be in. And being a undertrained person, I mean, I am not trained to be here, but there are lots of uncertainties, lots and lots of rejection coming my way. So my last novel, it has been already rejected by 4 publishers. So I'm just hanging in here, but I have no regrets whatsoever, because as I said, it was never about what I was getting. It was always about what I was giving. So
Brilliant.
that's my journey. Thank you, everyone.
That's from imperfect me to I am perfect me. Yeah, as the
Yeah.
title of this discussion today goes. If I can request Divya to come in and share with us your fascinating journey. Yeah.
Thank you, Ram. So, from my side, I also took a different path than most BITSians. After finishing physics with Triple E in campus, I graduated in 2006. And through campus placement, I don't know what went on, but I landed up in a Sarkari job from campus placement. I joined Indian Oil Corporation as a maintenance engineer through the electrical engineering degree that I had. So that was also a very different experience because being one of the few lady maintenance engineers in a power plant and in a refinery was also a different experience for me. So I would wear these gum boots and hard hat and go every day to work in the Manali refinery in Chennai Petroleum. And there used to be a very old 1969 naphtha based power plant turbine. It will always shut down, so I had to always be there to restart it. So I did this rigmarole for 6 months, and then I realized that I'm not a great maintenance engineer, and I'm not getting any satisfaction out of it. So I quit my public sector job, and then I started preparing full time for civil services. So when I was preparing for civil services, I also volunteered for an organization called Aid India. So there were a couple of BITSians in Aid India, and I reached out to them, and I wanted to explore whether I could join the NGO sector and the social sector and contribute. So I used to work with school children in government schools. I used to fill a lot of performers and evaluate their learning levels for Aid India. That's when I realized that an IAS officer from Tamil Nadu, Mr. Vijay Kumar, I think at that point in time, was school education commissioner, who introduced a concept called activity-based learning, and he could implement it in one go in all the government schools of Tamil Nadu. So I realized that when you work for an NGO or a sector, you could contribute only to a certain number of people, but working with the government, you can create large scale impact. That made me prepare with more fervor for the civil services. And the first time I didn't even get through prelims. I just went and sat and wrote the exam. I never got through. Then I started taking coaching from Delhi. And being a Tamilian, I didn't know a word of Hindi. So in Delhi, it was a huge struggle for me to prepare from Delhi. Then the second attempt I got through Indian Railway Services. So I was working there, and finally in my third attempt, I made it to the Indian Administrative Service. And from 2010, I'm serving the government as an IAS officer. And initially, I was posted as sub-collector in Bhubaneswar division. Then I went on to become project officer of Integrated Tribal Development Agency in Bhadrachalam. I worked as joint collector, and finally, before reaching this place, I was collector Adilabad in another tribal district of our state. So right now, I'm serving as Commissioner Women and Child Welfare, and so far the journey has been great. It has been very, very challenging. Sometimes it's so frustrating. I keep telling I'm going to quit today and I'm not going to go to office tomorrow, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, I've also had many wonderful days where, all the struggles mean something. And when you see the smile on some child's face or some vulnerable person's face who have received your service and happy about it. So that's what keeps me going, I think. So over to you, Ram.
No, I guess, Divya, this conversation or introduction would not be complete if I did not mention to our audience about how this girl from Paragur in near Namakkal to actually has now accomplished to a point where you have a town or a village actually named after you. I mean, I'm sorry, I know I'm putting you on an awkward spot, but you have to tell us about, how this naming of a village after you actually really happened.
So yeah, as you mentioned, it's very embarrassing actually. But this happened after I came back from my stint in Adilabad. It actually reflects how loving and innocent the tribes of Adilabad are. I went there in very difficult times. There were two tribal groups which were warring with each other. So we had to make peace and bring in some sort of solace and peace in that area. So because of which I got very close to the tribal groups there. And I started learning their language, which is Gondi, as they call it, it is Koya. So I started learning their language and then reaching out to them. So the people who couldn't express their difficulties earlier now could access my camp office, as they call it. They could walk in anytime into my residence and they could explain their issues. So one fine day, a group of tribals had reached my camp office, and they had expressed that every monsoon their village gets flooded, and the place where they built their huts is very difficult to sustain during monsoon times. So they asked for a small piece of land, a dry area where they could build their huts. So with all the powers that a district collector has, this was not a very big deal. So we tried to give them that piece of land. And later I came to know, I didn't follow up with that. Later, after giving that land, I realized that they had gone ahead and built their huts. And once I left that place, later they named that small hamlet after me, for which I scolded them too, because they are really so innocent and naive that they went and named it after my name. But yeah, it's I always tell everyone that I have already achieved any amount of satisfaction through that gesture, and anything from on now I do is only an extra, because of the true love that they have expressed in what they received from myself.
So nice. More power to you, Divya. And you talked about, having achieved something and then everything else is, starting afresh, which is somewhat similar to the theme of what we actually also call as Punar Janmam. So I'm going to jump into an introduction request to Raghu. Yeah.
Hey, hi. Thanks, Ram. Great introduction, Shalini and Divya. So I am a proud BITSian from the 87 batch. I did the C group. Very proud to say that, because a lot of people in those days, had opted for a C group only after they do not get an A group or a B group, and so was my case too. So when I couldn't get into an A or a B, then you put all these choices of discipline, and then we landed in C group. It was a great journey. So after BITS, I've been working with many IT companies, startups, both in the US and in India. Lived in the US for about 12.5 years, worked in BITSian Ventures, then came back, then started my own consulting company, and then have been working with many startups, have impacted a few startups. And then during that journey, I started what is called as Datri, which is India's largest bone marrow registry. Because when I came to India, I found that a registry existed in the US and other parts of the world, but in India, there was no registry. So people suffering from fatal blood disorders like blood cancer, thalassemia, if they could not find a genetically matched donor in their family, then those patients were dying. So I thought, I had some exposure as a volunteer in the US. So I thought, let me, jump into that. Though I had no background of medicine, though I had no background of what is called as the HLA typing, I thought, let me get into that and see what we can do. It was a great journey. I did that for about 10 years. We recruited about 4 lakh donors all over India, and have impacted more than 500 lives, which includes almost 300 children suffering from either blood cancer or thalassemia. And while doing that, the floods happened in Chennai, and after the floods, we thought, me and a friend of mine in the US, we thought most people were very active during the floods. But after the floods, we wanted to make sure that these people who are affected, they were able to sustain their livelihood, and they are able to bring up their children the way they want to in terms of their education. So we started supporting education of children, and then we did some help during the cyclone. Then we did some help during the Kerala floods. And then we also, during the COVID, have helped about 50 musicians and about, 35 children to actually get back to school. And right now I'm again back in an IT industry, but I still am doing a lot of volunteer work in multiple areas. And thanks for having me on the panel.
Wonderful, Raghu. That's really fascinating and great to know about the cause of education. Obviously, as someone who's involved with Youth Loka, I could see the sense of satisfaction that comes in that sense. And, and I guess, I would invite Guru to actually share with us a little interesting story. I guess, I'm looking forward to hearing it again from you, Guru.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Guru Raj Kalyan. So like most of us on campus, I was a happy camper. So I used to strictly avoid going to classes, spent most of my time in Skylab, getting drunk more than a bit irregularly with my friends, and having meaningless conversations about the most irrelevant things, convinced those are the most relevant things of existence. Right? So I was like every other BITSian. But all this changed one afternoon when a friend of mine, he walked into my room and he said, "Hey Guru, the institute has unilaterally cancelled one of my registrations. And because of this, I'm going to lose 1 year." So we spoke about it. And before you knew what was happening, there was a strike organized. There was a hunger strike, which was against the institute. Now that is rather unusual in BITSian terms. The strike fizzled out. I think BITSians are general compromise seekers. So strike fizzled out. And but the institute never forgot who were the people behind the strike. A year later, I was drinking at the house of one of the lecturers on campus. Now, I would have thought it's a fairly innocuous thing, but the institute took a fairly dim view of this. And at the end of it, I was rusticated. I was packed off for a semester. And the lecturer, he resigned, and he's now built a fabulous career for himself in the US. So I had to go back home. I had to deal with the disappointments, anger, shock of my father and my mother, which I did. And then I realized I really had to find a place to go hide my head in shame for 6 months. Now, for these 6 months, I was lucky enough to find a job in Italy. So I found a job in a village which was outside Milan, and I worked as a shop floor worker. So for 6 months, my job was to build machines which would mix polyol and iso and inject out polyurethane foam, which would be used in the installation of refrigerator panels. So in the course of these 6 months, what I realized was Italy was my place. I loved Italy. Italy loved me. And I was going to get back there after I graduated. So I came back to campus. I treaded water. I finished my time. And sure enough, I went back to Italy. I did my master's there. I was working there. And while working there, one of the large Indian domestic appliances business, Videocon, at that point in time was very large. What they'd done was they acquired a company in Italy. They acquired a compressor manufacturing firm. Now, in the over-enthusiasm, they acquired the firm, but there's one thing to acquire the firm, but it's quite another to be able to integrate that firm, given the almost Byzantine laws of accounting and company law of Italy. Now, also the Italian culture is significantly different. So for them to find somebody like me, who was Indian, who had a fair sense of Italy, and who knew the domestic appliances business, because remember, so I've spent 6 months building these machines, and I had a fair idea of what the refrigerator sector was. So they were quite delighted, and worked with them for some time. And while we're doing the restructuring, we hired the Boston Consulting Group to come and do our restructuring. In the course of the restructuring, I realized, hey, I want to be on that side of the table. I don't want to be on this side of the table. And I asked them, what does it take to really be part of the BCG team? So they came back with the classic consulting answer. You don't have an MBA that we like. So we'd like to have an MBA from these list of schools. And if you have an MBA from these list of schools, we'll definitely consider you. And luckily for me, on that list of schools was one school in Milan itself. And so I said, okay, off I go. I got myself admitted to the MBA program. I graduated there. I got a summer internship at the Boston Consulting Group, and I had a job there. So I was working with them for some time, quite some time. But like most things in life, what seems glamorous from outside is quite a dehumanizing experience inside. And consulting, I think, tops the list in that. After a few years there, a friend and I, we said, this is great for credentialing, I think, but it's very bad for us as human beings. It was a completely dehumanizing experience. So I resigned along with my friend, and I came back. I came back to India, and I actually joined Standard Chartered in their strategy office in London. And when I joined them in London, at that point, they were scaling up their operations, their back office operations in India, called Scope. And they asked me, do you want to first go and run the program management office there, which I did. Very quickly, I realized that my problem was not with consulting as much as with the entire corporate life. Corporate life is fabulous, but it's really not where my interests lay anymore. And I just switched off. 6 months, I was exploring myself. My all-suffering, enduring wife supported me for 6 months because she was my job. But I realized that ultimately I had to leverage on the skills I have. And my skills were mergers and acquisitions, building joint ventures, and management consulting. But I could do that at a pace which was comfortable for me, rather than at the frenetic pace inside consulting firms. So I built a small practice for myself where I would do advisory work for Italian firms looking to acquire Indian entities, build equity-based joint ventures. And I would invest in the equity of those joint ventures or do technology transfers. So today I'm considered myself extremely lucky because I do what I know best, which is consulting and acquisitions. I do it at my own pace. It gives me plenty of time to pursue two of my passions. One is Dzogchen Buddhism, which is a specific branch of Buddhism, and the other is photography, travel, and the third also, which is practically doing nothing. I like doing nothing. I think we don't have to justify doing nothing. I love doing nothing. And so it's looking back, I think it all just fell together. It was not any plan. And yeah, here I am.
Brilliant. How many times do we hear people willing to stand up and say, I love doing nothing? So that brings this next question, if I may, to Divya. Not being afraid, to talk about imperfection, right? So is that easier said than done, Divya? You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah. So yes, Ram, I feel that a lot of us go through this journey, and this brilliant hearing Shalini, Guruji, and Rajgopal, Raghuji. So as we demonstrated, we are all imperfect in many senses. I remember when I used to be in BITS, everyone used to be talking about writing the GRE and the CAT. I think there's also a BITS to MS Google group. There is a BITS to CAT Google group. I don't know. There were many such groups. But when we were preparing for civil services, there were no such groups. So we used to be like odd women, odd men out who were crazily slogging it out in Delhi. When everyone was talking about C2Cs, our C2Cs were zero. We are depending on our parents to give us money to prepare and stay in hostel environment and so on. And I'm very impressed by Guruji. Like, he's been rusticated. My God, that was like icing on the cake. I mean, how much more imperfect than can you get? I think my dad would have got a heart attack if I went home one day and said I'm rusticated. So mine was not so glamorous as that. I was not rusticated, but still. With no money in your hand, and when all your friends are doing something that's very fashionable, and you're doing something different, obviously it took a toll on me. I would even hesitate to say that I'm just studying, so I would say I'm volunteering for this NGO. I would have volunteered for the NGO long time back. So it's very difficult to say that you're doing nothing and just studying. And of course, a lot of times, even during our job, when we are doing our job, especially when you're in public service, you are in always in the spotlight. There's media who's reporting about you. There's a lot of expectations that you have to live up to. And you're also criticized. Like, any petitioner can walk into my chamber and just shout at me and go back. He can express his anger, anguish, and so on. So, you need to take in so much and yet maintain your, tranquility, peace, and everything. So I feel that we are always afraid to, say what we like. Whatever we are doing, if it doesn't match the standards, then we keep on suppressing it, and we don't talk about it. But I feel that we should definitely come out and say that this is what I like. And I really like what Shalini told me, that she's not faking it anymore, and she really free. She's free from all that living up to expectations that she needs to do. So I think at some level we have to get over that fear. We need to live the way we like. And I'm also happy to say that now there is a BITS to Civil Service group.
Lovely.
So now there are so many of us now in the civil services. Like every year, I think 3-4 of us get through. So now you see, like when we started out, it was like nobody to help us out, and now so many of us are there. So there are a lot of imperfect people around, and nobody should be afraid to take that path ahead, I think.
That's a nice one. And I know, Guru, you like to call this as the mirage of perfection, coming that all of us come from the deserts of Pilani. I guess that's a very nice way to call it out. So how does one really become more aware to deal with it, Guru?
So look, it's really about solving problems, the way I see it. And I've always solved for authenticity rather than for perfection. So authentic to the situation and authentic to myself as an individual. Now, you could ask the question, but what is the line between being authentic and being within your comfort zone? The answer for that is just your intellectual honesty. But having said that, I think I like the way you phrased it. You said the mirages of perfection. Perfection is certainly a mirage. There's no question about it. I think if you even spend a minute on self-reflection, it becomes very evident. Especially, I think how it works in my head is when you see something or you see somebody which is either aspirational or beautiful, you either want to become that or you want to possess that. I think it's possible also to have a different way, which is to just enjoy that, drop it, and go. So if you do that, you're fine. I think when you see something aspirational, both in terms of a person or in terms of an object, and you want to become that or you want to possess that, that sets up pathways to perfection. And these are pathways to greed, actually. These sets up pathways to greed. And these pathways to greed is what I call perfection. And greed causes misery. Pathways to perfection cause misery. That's as simple as that. Now, the question is, right, so what do we do about this? I don't know, is the simple answer. I think everybody finds their own path. For me, it has been through exploring the rather enchanting world of Dzogchen Buddhism. It resonates with me. And one of the things that I've learned in my reflections there, in my meditations there, in my readings there, and even in day-to-day life, is that they make a very clear distinction between thinking and awareness. And as long as you understand this distinction between thinking and awareness, this whole mirage of perfection vaporizes in that awareness. I know this sounds very abstract, but I really don't know any other way to express this. The Buddhists, they make an analogy. What they say is, I mean, your thinking is like a cloud and your awareness is like the sky. And typically, your thinking, the thought process is as immaterial, as insubstantial, and as formless and as ever-changing as the clouds in the sky. No two are similar, they look alike. And they have this further bad habit in that they tend to come together and they create the illusion of continuity as one whole, but in fact they're not, they're ever-changing. And once in a while, these clouds will part. And because before they part, they create the impression that these clouds are actually the sky. But when they part, you see the sky. And that's the awareness. So awareness is the space in which these clouds actually exist. But once you understand that, once you see that there is awareness, once you see that these are clouds of impermanence, it vaporizes by itself. And in that vaporization, perfection also vaporizes. You just be yourself. Authenticity is the issue, I think. And authenticity is possible only in awareness, not through thinking. Thinking is the past. I don't know if that made any sense, but I can't think of any other way of expressing this.
Fascinating. I am reminded of the classes of Professor B.K. Nema when we used to learn symbolic logic. We used to talk about all of this. So, no, I guess path of misery to the path of self-awareness. I guess we're moving from one orbit to another. So maybe I'll pose the question to Shalini here. So how do we identify the quote-unquote escape velocity that can get us off this rat race, Shalini?
Yeah, so so what I think about it as see whatever we are doing, like our job or the profession what we are in, so that is that has kind of a pull on us, which I would like to kind of parallel to the pull of a earth or a object, a gravitational pull of an object. So we actually orbit around that pull, and it gives us such some kind of security that okay, we will be in this orbit and we are not going to go astray from this. But for at least for some people, the orbiting becomes kind of very difficult after some time, because we don't know whether we are supposed to be in this orbit around this particular gravitational object. I mean, in this the influence of this thing. So we just keep orbiting forever, some of them, and sometimes we kind of need to get away from that gravitational pull of whatever we are doing. For in my case, it was my job, it was my engineering job, and I was in that orbit for quite a long time, and I wanted to get out of that. But yeah, as for example, any planet pulls the objects around it. So I was kind of in that orbit for a long time, and I wanted to get out of that, and there should be some escape velocity, like you need some thrust from internal or external so that you can get out of that and fall into a space where you are not anymore protected by the gravitational pull. You are out in the space, and as I said the other day, you can even be gulped by a black hole. There is a lot of uncertainty, but I think to get out of that orbit, it's not like immediately you get out of it. It's not like you just jump out of it one day, at least in my experience. There are a lot of things that keeps happening to us over the years, or probably over some time for most of the people, which kind of adds to the momentum of the person who is orbiting. So for me, it was my travel blogs, basically. So I was writing my travel blogs. I was writing a lot, which kind of giving me momentum to go out of my orbit. And I just kind of kept widening my orbit. And once, like I would say, there was one particular incident which I had already shared with the group. So one day during my maternity leave, at that time I finished my first travel guide to Hampi, and I published it on Amazon. But I was still on the fence. I was still on my orbit. I was not planning to, I didn't have the courage to get out of it. So I was taking photographs of my like 3-4 months old daughter, and something suddenly a thought struck me, like, I mean, I was planning to put her photos on FB and kind of blot about it. And then I realized, I thought, like, is she going to be my biggest achievement? I mean, am I going to put all my dreams and aspirations on her? And am I going to expect her to live my life for myself? Then I thought that it's not right. I mean, it's not right to do that. So I think that during all those maternity leave, and motherhood actually shakes you up and resettles you, regroups you. So I think that actually gave me the momentum to get out of it. And interestingly, I didn't quit my job after a year of my maternity leave. I was on that orbit till that was the gravitational pull of my job, and I was worried about financials, the success, the uncertainty of things. And but somehow I kind of got out of the orbit, and I am still threading the the uncertain world. But I think coming out of that orbit itself is a kind of a milestone for me. So that was incredibly difficult, and I will not trying to sugarcoat it. It was excruciating to come out of that. I was so with the support of my family, my husband, everyone actually thankfully supported. So I think the ecosystem is also very important. Building an ecosystem that supports you is a very important thing. So I think I answered your question.
The audience today are going to be relating to that excruciating pain you're referring to, moving from one orbit to another. In fact, there's a lot of unexpected outcome that comes out of these experimentation. Raghu, so how does one really learn to embrace them? Yeah.
So I think if you're going down a path and you have a goal to accomplish, then I think any of the unexpected outcomes can be dealt with. So I'll probably share a couple of examples. So when I was very active in Datri, we had a patient who was like an 18-year-old boy suffering from blood cancer, and we had only one match of a girl from Ahmedabad. And the way it works is you register as a blood stem cell donor, which is a fairly easy process. It only takes 5 minutes to fill up an application form, sign a consent form, and give a buccal swab sample. And then you are just in the database. So we had a database of about 4 lakhs, until about 2019. So this girl, when we went and approached her saying that, you have the capability to save an 18-year-old boy, she said, of course, you tell me what I need to do, but please come and talk to my parents. So typically we have counselors who go there in the organization, but we also needed a translator because they can only speak Gujarati. So you go in a car. As soon as you go in the car and get down, many people getting down from the car itself creates some kind of an expectation in the neighborhood saying that, oh, maybe they're coming to see her because she's probably a girl getting ready to get married. So first you'll have to deal with that. Then once you go in there, the parents listen to everything and they say that, we are all not educated. We'll talk to our family doctor. Then they go and talk to the family doctor. Family doctor says, I don't know about all this. This is not something very common in India. So then we say, okay, we will have some hemato-oncologist in Ahmedabad to explain to this person what it is. And that family doctor did not have the ego some of these doctors have. So he said, okay, I'm ready to learn. Let me talk to them. So he spoke to the hemato-oncologist, and then he said, okay, there's nothing wrong. You can have your daughter donate. So all this was taking about 2-3 weeks. By the time when the parents said, okay, we are all ready, but you know what, my daughter is engaged. Talk to Himanshu. So we spoke to Himanshu. Himanshu says, you know what, this is great. My future wife is going to donate blood stem cells, but ours is an arranged marriage. So you come and talk to my parents. So you go talk to the parents. Then once you talk to the parents, they say that, no, we come from a very specific Liuva Patel community. So we have one community leader called Prahalad Bhai. So Prahalad Bhai has to bless us before you do this. So then I have to hustle, network and find the right people who knows this Prahalad Bhai, and then have Prahalad Bhai go through this whole thing and then say, okay, go ahead, do it. So when she actually donated, there were like a lot of bouncers outside the blood stem cell donation room. And luckily, everything went well. She was able to donate. The patient received the stem cells. After 1 year, they both met each other. So they're more like a brother and sister. And now she's got married, she's got kids. So it's all a happy situation. But what happens is in this journey, there are several unexpected things that we need to go through. A similar situation happened when we were, when a donor had to donate during the Kerala floods. So the donor was coming from one part of Kerala to Cochin by car, and the water was quickly filling up. So just before 12 kilometers before the hospital, they were stranded, and that whole place became an island. And there were about 1,000 people in the college, including this donor and one of my colleagues. And they couldn't actually get out of that place. So then I had to actually hire a helicopter. After 2 days, he was stranded there. He was from a helicopter. The boy was picked up, went to that particular hospital, which was only 12 kilometers away. But that hospital also started getting flooded. So most of the doctors were leaving home. So we somehow made sure that he was able to donate in the first floor rather than the ground floor. And then once he donated, we got another helicopter to actually bring the product to Coimbatore. And from there on the road, we brought it back to Vellore. So if our objective is to save a patient, I think we can, do anything that is possible. A lot of creative ideas come to your mind because when you face a situation, you think about what you can do, and that's what we did.
Amazing. You beat Vikram and Vedal there, yeah, in terms of persistence there. Really, I mean, this is amazing to know how, I guess this is about being so single-minded focused. I guess we're moving to the last section of the discussion today. We have last 15 minutes. Maybe we could have all the panelists on the spotlight, if that's possible, please. We'll probably have this as what I would like to call it as a rapid fire round. So quick questions, quick answers, and then there are a number of questions coming from our audience. We'll try to answer as much as we can. So maybe I'll start with you, Shalini. I mean, I guess success is measured in more ways than one. Agree? You're on mute.
Yes, of course. See, the main important thing for everyone, I think the most important thing somebody has to do is create their own definition of success. If I may, I'll just read out 2-3 lines from somebody who's a big inspiration for me. This is from Bill Watterson, cartoonist, the creator of Calvin and Hobbes. And this is something which he said. So ambition is only understood if it is to rise to the top of some imaginary ladder of success. Someone who takes an undemanding job because it affords him the time to pursue other interests and activities is considered a flake. A person who abandons a career in order to stay home and raise children is considered not to be living up to his potential, as if a job title and salary are the sole measures of human worth. You will be told in 100 ways, some subtle and not, to keep climbing and never be satisfied with where you are, who you are, and what you're doing. There are a million ways to sell yourself out, and I guarantee you will hear about them. So I think I cannot put it more beautiful than he did.
You're an author, yeah. I mean, this is really words of wisdom. Raghu, we can also celebrate imperfection. Your thoughts?
So my thought, I actually discussed this with Aarti just before this meeting. I don't think imperfection exists in my dictionary because all of us are here. We have all done something. We're all feeling happy about it. Look how happy Guru is, Divya is, Shalini is. So we're all happy about what we're doing. So I think imperfection need not be the word that we need to look at. That's my perception.
Interesting. I am perfect is how you like to call it. That's nice. Well, Divya, is it okay to be vulnerable?
Yes, of course. You see, actually, I would say that I'm in a comfortable job. Okay, there's a lot of tension in my job, but I have a salary and sarkari naukri, for whatever you call it. But just imagine a lot of people who become entrepreneurs. They just give up everything and start life afresh. They have so many vulnerabilities, and being vulnerable is the key to start something new. And whenever we try out something new and not go along the beaten path, I think there will be a lot of vulnerabilities that we face. But what is the point of being a frog in the well? And we know that there's going to be only this environment, and we'll be safe probably for the rest of the life. But without exposing ourselves to vulnerability, how will we even know? So I think being vulnerable is completely the important factor for to explore new things. But I would say this, that you need not be too harsh on yourself, that you expose yourself to so much of vulnerability that you're not able to come out of it. But it's okay to be vulnerable sometimes. The most important thing, that how Shalini pointed out, is that whenever we feel vulnerable, we should have that safe spaces for us, like to confide in. Maybe it might be our mentor, a person in our workspace, a spouse, a parent, a friend. So when we express the kind of fear and whatever we are going through, I think that vulnerability will be taken care of. For example, when you take a life-changing decision to quit your job and do something new, obviously it's a very big decision and you're definitely vulnerable for it. But if you prepare your family for it, and if you feel that you're not making some rash decision suddenly, and they understand the fire in you and the passion in you, I think you no longer will be quote unquote vulnerable. You would be now protected with so many layers of empathy and compassion and safety nets, that you don't have to worry about it. And lastly, I would like to say this: this rat race, really rings a big bell within me. All of us who got into BITS, we all were good performers in our school. Our parents would say, if you do well in 10th, then you'll get a good stream. Then they'll say, please just complete 12th, you get into a good college, and everything will be over. Then the rat race goes on and on and on, right? So this is what happens in our life too. So my friend he booked a flat, so why am I not still having an apartment? So this kind of comparison will take you nowhere. So I know a lot of my friends who have just given up everything. I just met a friend last week who lives in a village, in a commune. He just went back to the village, and he said that I'm going to just live in a commune. I have enough money right now. Enough money means he gives himself 15,000 rupees to him and his family the whole month. So I think that as someone mentioned, I forget whether it's Guru or Raghu. Greed is what makes us a lot vulnerable. But once the greed is gone, we are no longer vulnerable. I often say I earn much more than what I can spend, even though a government salary gives me less. But if your expectations and aspirations are less, then you can do many things that you love, and then that you can go ahead and do, that will make you less vulnerable. So I feel with these thoughts, maybe being vulnerable is okay, but keep those safety nets with you, and never compare yourself, and because whatever you're doing is very different. And finally, it's always important to not let greed overtake you anytime.
Thank you, Divya. I think that was, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there in the audience who are resonating with every single word you just said. I mean, and coming from you, who has demonstrated, what it means to actually do what you're doing. Thank you for that. Yeah. And I guess, Guru, I'm going to ask you this, the most interesting question of the day, in my view, which is perfectly fine to be imperfect. Explain the statement to us, please.
Yeah, it is. But I just want to point out, say when you say it's perfectly fine to be imperfect, there is a certain image of perfection which is in your mind, which you say is okay not to reach, right? You say, I already have an image of perfection in my head, but I give myself permission not to reach that image. The whole problem is the image-making machinery in the head. So the real question is, how can you shut off the image-making machinery in your head and get on with the business of living? Because image-making is about the future, living is about the now. I don't want to get into the mindfulness business because it's incredibly overused, hyped, and corrupted term. But that's the whole point. I mean, Jiddu often says that, the image I have of you in my head and the image you have of me in your head, these are the two having a relationship. You and I are never having a relationship. So the whole problem is, how do you shut off the image-making machinery? And the answer to that, if one can start asking oneself, what is the way in which I can shut off this image-making machinery in my head and get on to the business of living day to day, point to point, I think we'll answer a lot of the questions ourselves.
Well, I mean, I couldn't but, smile at the interesting coincidence. You're talking about the image making machinery, and you actually are such an avid photographer. So I couldn't actually but make that observation. Look, we actually are, getting to the end of the session, and before I hand it back over to Padmini, there are a couple of questions that are coming from the audience, and I'm going to just pose it to the panelists here. I guess there's a question that Raj Shankar is asking, Guru, that every journey is unique. So what's your advice on? And he says, look, I mean, those days could be different from even a decade later. So what's your advice on finding the quote unquote work-life balance?
Look, like I said, I've never been a great advocate of this work-life balance, because that's the origin of schizophrenia. Life is whole. You cannot divide life into work life, that life, and this life. You have only one life. And the question is, how have you dug deep enough inside yourself to be able to respond to all these imaginary fractioned parts of your life in the same possible way? Because it's the same energy, it responds in the same way, as long as you dig deep enough. So I think if we respond from awareness, we respond to both, and everything is our life. So there's no question of work-life balance. There's only a question of living life well.
Thank you, Guru. I'm getting messages here that we are getting to the end of the session, and we really need to conclude this, and some of our panelists also need to exit. Before I hand it back to Padmini, here is actually a small anecdote I have to tell everyone, and I know Padmini won't allow me to, so I better start saying this before she comes on the screen. All of this started actually with her attempting to make one column with a peacock. And she says she's tried making this peacock, and then it turned out to be something else. And then I could see Padmini laughing out there. So sorry, I wouldn't steal your thunder. So Padmini, why don't you tell us about the peacock story? I think we all owe the peacock that much credit to this discussion.
Okay, so obviously I'm part of this imperfect me, and there was a story about learning new things during COVID, and of course I was also victim of putting up all those learnings on WhatsApp groups and DP, and I tried to make a peacock rangoli. The peacock halfway through the rangoli mutated into something a cross between a sparrow, duck, and some other one kind of a ninja peacock. And then one of my very dear friends, who also happens to be Guru's wife, mentioned, why do you set benchmarks and whatever? Didn't you enjoy the journey with colors? So that was one of the conversations that really started making Aarti, Kiran, and me think about what do we really want? Do we want to enjoy this learning, or we are constantly striving for these images of perfection, as Guru calls it? But I guess I will never be a perfect artist. I'm going to continue to be an imperfect artist. With that, and with permission from Ram, we come to the end of the conversation. So how would you guys summarize these conversations? If I need one word to summarize, I would use the word authentic, and I'm sure all of you will back me up. A big shout out to our panelists, Guru, Raghu, Divya, and Shalini, for their generosity in sharing their valuable time and deep thoughts. And by the way, guys, thanks for wearing your heart on your sleeve and sharing your deeply personal and vulnerable moments. I hope the BITS fraternity will be the safe space for all of us to go to, no matter what we are feeling, right? No feeling need to be hidden from our BITS fraternity. A big thank you to Ram for connecting the dots and facilitating this very interesting conversation. We literally caught him on the tarmac. And yes, I would like to thank two very enthusiastic young ladies who helped us design, curate, agonize over this panel, over what we call our nighty conversations, to young moms, multitaskers, Aarti Bharat and Kiranmai Sanagavarapu, who really did a great job of getting all of this, all of the elements together for the panel discussion. Siddharth, thank you so much. You've been our go-to person for everything to do with IT. By the way, Vignesh was sharing with me that we crossed 150 registrations, a very big high for any organizing team, particularly on a Saturday evening. And thanks to the fantastic panel and moderator, and of course, the marketing campaigns designed by Majid Rahman and Associates. We hope this will be followed by many more soul-searching conversations through the BITSAA forum, and can't thank BITSAA enough for their unconditional support. Vignesh, Chimpu, we do so much look forward to curating the next panel discussion for BITSAA. Thank you.
Thank you.